So this is what we have listed as the topic, the title, What Students Don't Know, They Don't Know. And yes, my title is indeed ambiguous, and I recognize that. What students don't know, they don't know. And, we could go almost anywhere with that. But what we are actually going to be talking about is based on some conversations that for whatever reason have come up recently, recent conversations I've had with various faculty members, and will be and which brought me to something that I felt like we kind of needed to have a conversation about. Our topic is metacognition, our strategy of the day. And as I said, I've had a couple of conversations with faculty over the last few weeks that seem to lead us to the conclusion that maybe they don't know. So here's what we are going to do. As you got a little sneak preview, we are going to be defining the term and giving and taking a look at some background information about the term. And we are going to think about the skills that our students need in order to be metacognitive about their learning, and then some tips on teaching those skills to students, and then some guiding questions, because every article that you read about metacognition has some of the types of questions that can lead us to that. So the concept of thinking about how we learn and what it takes to learn goes all the way back, a historical perspective, going all the way back to Socrates' format of the Socratic questioning. But ideas along these lines have come up in readings from about Vygotsky, Skinner, Badura, Bransford, even Dewey. 1933, we can learn more from reflecting on our experiences than from the actual experiences themselves. So the idea of thinking about our learning is something that goes all the way back to it's simply a matter of teaching. One of the teaching practices is thinking about what we're doing and why it works, and if it didn't work, why didn't it work? So the actual origin of the term was when John Flavel posted in a research from 1976 that metacognition refers to one's knowledge concerning one's own cognitive processes or anything related to them. And so he took the idea of thinking about how we learn and the concepts of reflecting and put a name to it. And of course, metacognition is a pretty, it's a pretty clear and easy way of thinking about it. Meta being overview of, and of course, cognition is what we do. These are some other definitions that I've encountered in some of the articles that I've been reading: an awareness or analysis of one's own learning or thinking processes, the idea that it includes self-regulation and in order to make our learning intentional, and includes reflection, and you will see that in almost everything. High order thinking that enables understanding and control of one's cognitive processes, especially when engaged in learning. So based on most of the research, and by the way, in terms of educational research, research on metacognition is a relatively recent tool. The most of what we find has been within the last 4 decades, but that the primary components to consider and to make sure that we share with our students have to do with planning, thinking about how we plan what we're going to do. That has to do with monitoring. How did I do that? Did that work for me last time? What do I need to change in it? And then evaluating. when we finished an assignment, how did that work? What did I do? So that the components of planning and monitoring and writing, I mean, evaluating, excuse me, are are some of the key elements on it. And so this next one is as I said, I'm a huge component of concept maps, and this is from some of the information on the actual components of metacognition, and what I have in the middle of the screen, thinking about my thinking, is what most people usually acknowledge as a what would be the term elevator description definition of metacognition is thinking about my thinking. In addition to teaching some of the tools of metacognition, we probably also need to teach what it means to think critically about a concept, because you're all in areas that have some pretty deep ideas and concepts, and so being able to help them work through, process their thinking so that they actually get to what they need to have in order for it to be successful in that. These are two ways, and we'll be talking a little bit more about them, about incorporating the idea of metacognition into your classroom culture. And it can be integrated into classroom activities, or it can, and that would be, as Doreen mentioned, having them put something in a reflection paper at various points during the semester. Or it could also be teaching those specific strategies. And yes, our courses are full with content, and yet taking a short amount of time to teach specific strategies is a beneficial experience. So integrating into classroom activities. So you could incorporate as a part of an assignment to add a reflection question to think about what your process was as you worked on this assignment. One of the things that I read, that I found in a couple of the articles that I read, is to be open to allowing them to identify where they are confused about things. We've often hear of one of the strategies about the muddiest point in today's session, and letting students know that we don't always have to have everything be, here's what I know, here's something that I don't know, I'm not sure about this. Can we talk about it a little bit more? Or how can I figure this one out? Reflections, we've talked about that several times, and taking the time to literally stop and think about what we've done, why we did it, how it turned out, what can we do differently next time. And one of the things that I also found really really interesting in a couple of the articles had to do with identifying how our ideas, how our perspective about the concepts changes over time as we add to the information and scaffold into it, so that what we thought of, and Doreen's comment about a reflection paper early in the semester and one toward the end of the semester, students would be able to see how their ideas have changed as they went through the semester. And then this is one of the things that came up in the Slido poll, is for us to monitor our own reflections, to literally be there, either in front of the classroom if you happen to be face to face, or in a video. Here's a question, here's a problem that I encountered, and here's what I went about doing to see if I could figure out how to work through that problem. So modeling for the students the process that we use to identify and to work our way through our own metacognitive skills. So all of these things could be incorporated into any of your assignments, into any of your discussions. Take a minute to reflect on what we talked about. But we also have the opportunity to teach some of these specific strategies. Pre-assessment, tapping into prior knowledge on a topic is such an important key part of learning, because once we start out by saying, well, in the previous unit or in our session 2 weeks ago, we talked about this. Now we're going to take a piece of that and go into it in a little bit more depth. So helping them connect to the prior knowledge of the topic, giving our brains something to latch onto. Assigned reflections. We referenced doing an actual reflection assignment at various times during the class, but also even having a reflection journal, which would be simply one-on-one between the student and the instructor. In some cases, the instructor could comment, but not necessarily. And so the only quote requirement for doing that is that there is a post in there. I'm not going to judge what anyone else has thought about a particular thing, but that gives me some insight into how their thinking has progressed. And again, the idea of identifying the changes that we've made in our perceptions or ideas about what we're learning over time, over the course of a semester or a couple of weeks, to actually really reflect and think about, I did think it was this, but since we talked about this and this, I realized that we also means this. And then thinking like and in my case, I would say thinking like a teacher, because I teach pre-service teachers, but it could be thinking like an accountant, thinking like an attorney, thinking like a scientist, because you're working on preparing them for a field, and you want them to start to consider what it looks like and what it feels like to be in that field, and to think about how to address some of the challenges that come up when we are in that field. And I know in the field of education, it's pretty easy for them to think about, what happens when, and how is that going to, how's that going to impact the class? So these are all ways of teaching specific strategies. How does a teacher in a classroom of fifth graders actually deal with these things? Or how does an accountant deal with taking this information and putting it into the spreadsheet? I sound like I know what I'm talking about, right? That's a joke. Okay, so we can either do it teaching specific strategies, helping them understand that these are ways that we can improve our learning. And this might be where I need to bring you some of the other ideas that I have encountered. I did not want to put all of this stuff on a slide because it's just way too many words. But there's been a lot of research, as I said, over a period of time. Metacognition has been linked to improving thinking skills and promoting conceptual change in students. It's associated with promoting students' overall academic success. Some of the research has been studied in students from grade school through college and has produced some important findings. Uh, Metacognitively aware learners are more strategic and perform better than unaware learners. They use learning strategies more effectively. So the things that we teach them as far as how to plan their learning, monitor their learning, and evaluate what they've done, they're able to do much more effectively. And they are more aware, this I found fascinating, they are more aware of when they are not comprehending something that they are trying to learn. So being in the practice of reflecting on our learning, thinking about what I did, how it worked, and how I can improve on it makes us more aware of when we actually don't understand something. Again, that point of confusion, the muddiest point. How do I work my way around that? And metacognitive awareness is not a function of intellectual ability, and metacognitive skills are not domain specific. They are remarkably consistent across different fields. As I said, everything that I've read comes, has a variety of types of questions, and I've mentioned a few of them as we've gone along. Some of the questions that the students could ask themselves: what's my best plan for preparing for class? What questions do I have? What do I need to have with me? Again, one of the as the bare necessities of life is, what do I need to take to class with me? We make some assumptions, but it probably doesn't hurt to have them really focus on that and write it down somewhere. What's the most effective way for me to prepare for a class, a test? One of the articles had pseudo interviews with two different students, one of whom was talking about, the fact that, she had spent the whole weekend reading the text and reading the notes, so she felt like she was well prepared for the test. But then the other interview, again, these were pseudo interviews, but the other interview was had to do with a student who reviewed the PowerPoints each week, went back over notes, looked at the text and the notes from the PowerPoints and the class, and made to make those connections. So can they review the presentation? Can I review the presentation after class? Will that help me? Comparing my notes to the teacher's presentation. Again, what am I confused about? We need to make sure that they know that it's perfectly okay to say, I don't quite understand that. And then how does this relate to other content? Again, that's that scaffolding, the prior knowledge piece. Let's get personal. Are you metacognitive about your own teaching? And for most of us, especially with the group that I know that I'm talking to today, you are skilled teachers, and this information is intuitive. We do it almost as a rote. When I'm if I have been teaching on campus in a face-to-face situation, then my ride home is reviewing things that happened in class and what worked, what didn't work, because goodness knows there's plenty of that too. But just to the process of going over that, it's intuitive as we leave the class, or as we are preparing then for the next class. What happened? What do I need to adjust to? That type of thing. But we can also be intentional about it. Set up a reflection time. Jot down ideas. Make sure that we think about how things worked and what happened when they worked, and making sure if you've got it written down, it's not going to fly out of your head. I have that. That's a situation that I need to be more intentional about, is writing those things down and making sure that. So thinking about your own teaching and how you go about making these things happen. So here's some questions that I have for you, and I do not expect you to jot them down or to answer them, but to give you something, again, to think about as you were getting ready, as you were planning to join this session. These are just some ideas for you to think about. I'm not looking for answers unless you just want to share something. Why did you decide to attend this session? What went through your head? How did you decide on that? Oh gosh, I'm not type. What did you already know about the subject? Or did you have any idea what the subject was going to be? How, if at all, have your ideas about it changed? Have we added something to your prior knowledge about this? What was confusing in what we've talked about today? And are you considering following up on any of the ideas? And are you thinking about how explicit you are with sharing your thoughts with students? So, and that has to do with planning to join this session, taking a look at what went through your head during the session and then evaluating it. I do thank you for joining us today.